divide. Faith and life walk side by side. We take the word and make it clear, talking true for all to hear. Crossroads, where theology meets culture. Crossroads, stories, life, and scripture. Turn the corner, find the light, where faith and life collide tonight.
Thank you for tuning in to the Crossroads podcast. Today's episode is going to be, as you can see by the title, more specifically on the gospel and why it's enough, and why am I even titling that. We'll get to that here in a second. But the first thing I really want to address is there's a little bit of controversy. There's a weird kind of thing that goes on in today's society. I feel like there are two kind of realities, right? If you're not on social media, and actually Gary Vee, who's a entrepreneur, influencer, he actually termed a new term. I don't know if he created it, but he was the one I heard use it, where he doesn't even call it social media anymore. I don't actually remember the exact terminology, because it's more like algorithm media, or because social media used to be like, well, you were friends with certain people, or you liked or followed certain people, and so those were all that you saw. And today, it's more like content media, where it's just like, we're just going to fill your algorithm with things. You may not even follow the page, but the algorithm thinks you might like it. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation. But if you're not on social media in the Christian sphere, a lot of the things that might be said on podcasts. Now, if you're listening to podcasts, you understand what's going on. Like, you're in this sphere. But if you're not hooked into, especially if you're listening to this and maybe you're outside of America, or you're not in the Reformed circles, you may have a much different experience online or in life, in the Christian life, than the people who are in that circle, this topic may not make much sense. You may not understand it. You may not know, like when I say the idea of it made its rounds around the Christian sphere and social media, this story from Pastor Jeff Durbin, who on his last episode of Apologia Radio made some remarks about John MacArthur and his eschatology that were not favorable. Like, people did not take to it well, and it's still going on. The conversation, the discourse, several days later, is still happening. I don't know, like if you're not in the social media circle, you may not have even known about this. But I do want to address it, because I think it's important that, because it addresses theology and culture, but also like just as a thinking exercise. And so a lot of the critique of Pastor Durbin is, I think, because John MacArthur is well respected. Now, I want to preface this by saying I'm in no way affiliated with either of these two men. I love both of their teachings. I would say, though, I have listened probably more to Jeff Durbin than to John MacArthur. I think John MacArthur was a fantastic preacher of the word, in certain ways. I personally didn't listen to him a lot because the I'm a big like tone person. And so because the other topic you may hear me talk about and be like, oh well, you were anti this, because we're going to talk about like the gospel is enough with this Protestia article that was posted. I'm not going to read the article or necessarily discuss the article, but just what it's about, and mega churches and all of these other things. And so I'm a tone person though when it comes to someone. So like even on the more reformed side, someone like a Sinclair Ferguson, who I love, or Derek Thomas, from also who does a lot of the League and Near stuff. Love those guys. Can't listen to them. I just because I say we don't have to be showmen doesn't mean you can't be charismatic. Like, for example, like Paul Washer is someone who, while I may not necessarily agree with all of his theology, he's someone that I can listen to and be at least interested in what he's saying, because he keeps the audience engaged. Not saying Dr. MacArthur didn't do that. He just didn't keep me engaged as much because of the monotone kind of way he spoke. And that's just a personal preference. But I've listened more to Durbin because I think our theologies connect a little bit more. And I just never really engage with a lot of John MacArthur. Like, as I sit back and read, like, and think about it, like, I don't think I've seen clips of Pastor MacArthur, but I don't know if I've ever fully watched full sermons intentionally of John MacArthur. And I say that with the utmost respect. He's a great Bible teacher. He's in heaven. All respect to him and his ministry. But with that being said, I think this is one of those things where, like, we all have a theology, right? And so, but also at the same time, like, there's a danger even within the Reformed community, the more Calvinistic community, of putting preachers on platforms to where these are faithful men, we can never question them. I still use at times a MacArthur study Bible, but if I'm reading a passage on the end times, I'm not going to read from John MacArthur because I think he was wrong on the issue. Just going to be completely honest with you. And that's fine to say. It's just like the last episode I did, talking about like putting creeds and theologies and church fathers and different traditions on pedestals. The same thing can be said in like the Protestant church, as well as putting certain preachers. If you know whether it's John Piper or John MacArthur of this age, or like Billy Graham. Billy Graham's on a pedestal to many evangelical Southern Baptists, to where if you even dare to question Billy Graham and his theology, Billy Graham had an awful soteriology. He had an awful understanding of salvation, in terms of he gave his call to that everyone had the chance to choose God. He had an awful soteriology in his Arminianism. But if you question that, you start to tap, I think, into what could be a little bit of idol making. And that goes even for me and myself. Whether it's, I've really had to sit down and say, like, did I put Vodi Bakum on a pedestal? Like, if people started to question Vodi Bakum, would I defend? And I think we tend to do this in every sphere, whether it's entertainment, whether it's politics, religion, other things, right? I tend to not try to put people on pedestals because it's idolatry at the end of the day. John MacArthur is a man at best. He wasn't right about everything, but he was right on a lot. But on these third tier issues like eschatology, if Christians don't allow other Christians to question other people's theologies, now we're just trying to create echo chambers or safe spaces. John MacArthur had every right to believe what he believed, in the same way that I believe, a right. And if I believe he's wrong, I have a responsibility to call out his teaching. And Pastor Jeff, as a pastor, leader of his flock, and really that's what Apologia Radio is, an extension of his own church as a ministry. He has a responsibility to lead the people who listen to that in a way that he believes, right? If he believes that premillennial dispensationalism is wrong, which I also would hold to, right? But in the same vein, like, I'm in a unique position here because I disagree with John MacArthur's dispensational premillennialism. And in the same vein, I also disagree with Jeff Durbin's postmillennialism. I'm the third party. I'm the amillennial in the room. In that, but also I'll say this: I tend to lean, like when Jeff Durbin was speaking in his episode, I tend to agree with a lot of what postmillennials say. And I even found myself wondering, like, do I falsely understand postmillennialism? And so, but at the end of the day, this is a third tier issue, and we should be allowed to have conversations about it without people getting upset. How dare you question such and such? We should want to question people's theologies and to make sure that they're on the road towards the truth. And so on this particular issue, everyone said that Jeff misquoted or misrepresented dispensational premillennialism as John MacArthur taught it, and I just don't see that. That's just my opinion. I don't see a misrepresentation of that. I mean, he used an exact quote from John MacArthur himself, where he says, "We lose down here." And I think a lot of the critique against Jeff Durbin is that they don't understand Jeff Durbin's position. Of course, a post-millennial is going to hear "we lose down here" and 100% disagree and call it wrong. Because they believe, post-millennials believe, we are guaranteed victory. And by the way, I think if I understand the theologies correctly, I understand mine. I believe we're guaranteed victory. The question that could be asked is, if we lose down here, right? And mainly what Jeff Durbin was doing was showing how John MacArthur, in areas of his ministry and life, where it was a little bit inconsistent, and I don't know if this is an intentional inconsistency or if he just didn't know how inconsistent he was being, because in the same sermon, he would say, "We lose down here," but then he also would then say, we're responsible essentially for maintaining righteousness, and we need to vote in. But the question then is, if you're a dispensational premillennialist, what is the purpose, what is the point of voting and being political? And like, if you truly believe that the church is just going to be raptured out and none of this matters, that this is worldly and the kingdom has nothing to do of it, why participate? The only consistent point of view, if you believe you need to participate in government and political matters, which, by the way, you should. I've already done an episode where I've put out Christians should be political. I thoroughly believe we are called to enter the political realm and not to run from it. Whether it's participating by voting, running for office, trying to create Christian laws and put in Christian legislators for the purpose of building Christian culture. And I like what Jeff Durbin's co-host, I think it's Luke, who was on that episode, said, I'm not a Christian nationalist, I'm a Christian culturalist. And I heard that, and I'm like, you know what? I like that. I would still consider myself, to be honest, a Christian nationalist in the most literal terminologies, right? I like the nuance Jeff Durbin says that they don't consider themselves Christian nationalists because there's no actual definition. There's 34 definitions and going around. My definition is this. I'm a Christian and I believe my nation. I'm a Christian, I love my nation, I believe my nation should be Christian. That's what I mean by Christian nationalist. But I understand everyone else saying, well, I don't claim it because we have these super far-right, alt-right, almost Nazi types who ruin it for everyone, essentially. But so there is a distinction, and so, you know, Apologia Church and ministries and all of that, they don't claim Christian nationalism, which is fine. My issue with John MacArthur saying we lose down here is I don't understand how you could say that when Jesus told his disciples as he was giving the commission in Matthew 28, he told his disciples, and I'm gonna read you the exact quote from Matthew 28, where he says, and starting in verse 18, and Jesus came up and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I commanded you, and I will be with you always, even to the end of the age. Okay, so if Jesus says he has all authority, that means he's won. Like victory is his. And from an amillennial perspective, my perspective, Jesus didn't just purchase future victory. He was victorious at the cross. What we see in Revelation 20 with the blinding of Satan happened at the cross, as we see in John 12, where Jesus says, and now the ruler of this world has been judged. Right? And so I think it's pretty obvious, right? And Jesus tells his disciples they're, I think it's Caesarea Philippi. It's where they're at. And Jesus is like, well, who do they say I am? And who do you say I am? And Peter says, you are the Christ, right? And Jesus says, and on this I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Right? And he says, so there's something that, and Jeff Durbin goes into this if you listen to his full episode, that I don't know if we fully grasp it. If while you're reading it, I know I didn't for several times that I've read it, but he said the gates of hell will not prevail. Well, gates are defensive. Gates don't move. Gates aren't an offensive weapon. Gates are defensive, which means that the church is on the offense. So Christ is going to build his church, and they're going to go on the offensive, and the defensive gates of hell will not prevail against the spreading of the gospel. And that's only possible because Satan is bound, as Revelation 20 says. I believe the amillennial interpretation makes the most sense because Satan's bound so that the nations can no longer be deceived. Therefore, we are guaranteed victory that the gospel will spread. Because what's the Great Commission? Make disciples of all nations. As you're changing people, you're changing nations. You're being political. As you change people individually, they're going to start changing people who have power. Excuse me. Excuse me. And so I don't understand the notion that John MacArthur says we lose down here. And everyone who's defending it saying, well, he wasn't talking in the terms of the spreading of the gospel, but he was speaking in terms of persecution. And I'm not going to say that they're wrong or not. I don't know. From the context Jeff Durbin played, and that's the only context I know. I've seen the full clip. To me, it doesn't seem like that's what he was saying. I don't think he was talking about persecution necessarily. Because in my head, logically, when I think about that doesn't make any sense to me. Because they think, do not dispensationalists believe that the church will be pulled from the earth before the tribulation starts? Now, this is also where I kind of have an issue with postmillennialism, and that I think they are too optimistic. And where the premillennialists, dispensationalists are too pessimistic, I think the postmillennialists are too optimistic. And maybe I misunderstand their doctrine, and if so, someone correct me. But from my understanding, they believe not that they create the kingdom, but that they that Christ's kingdom is here, and that the world's going to get better because of it. And I just don't see that in the scriptures. I don't see that in throughout history. Now, surely, from 33 AD till now, sure, there's some advancements because of Christianity. In fact, most advancements in technology and healthcare and different factors like that are because of Christianity spreading across the world. 100% agree with that. But I look at how Revelation's written. I look at the predictions throughout the entire Bible, the New Testament. And to me, it looks like it's not a pleasant existence to live here among the rebels. Even though, and so I hold two positions, or I can hold two opinions at the same time, and that is the gospel will spread, we win. The gospel message will spread, the elect will be saved. But at the same time, I expect great persecution because of it. But I think it was Tertullian who said, the blood of the martyrs is the life force of the church. The more they kill us, the more the church spreads. Right? And so that's what I believe from the Amil view is, yes, the gospel is winning and will win, and everyone who the Lord purchased on the cross will be saved. Because he has authority, he has bound Satan so the gospel can spread to the nations without being prevailed against by the gates of hell. And because of that, we win. And I can also hold that at the same time, winning's not going to look like sunshines and rainbows. It's going to look like persecution and martyrdom. because through martyrdom is how the church spreads. That the blood of the martyrs are the seed of the church. And that's what we've seen through history. So I don't expect a golden age or this like golden era of Christianity that is going to Christianize the world. It's this one of the things with like Christian nationalism where like I'm a little bit hesitant. Like I lean Christian nationalist in that I love my country and I'm a Christian and I want my country to be a Christian country with Christian leaders and Christian laws. But I don't think that in the world we live in that is necessarily the most realistic way to see the world. And so that's what I strive for, and I think individually that's what every one of us should aim to strive for. But that doesn't necessarily mean that culturally. And so I do like the idea of a Christian culturalist. That I'm not necessarily looking at Christianizing entire nations or Christianizing the world. I'm more just to be honest, I'm more concerned with making a Christian America. And allowing everyone else who, in their own country to Christianize their own nation. I don't want to Christianize the world. I just want America to be a Christian nation with Christian leaders and Christian laws. And so I look at the world. I don't see this golden age where like heaven's on earth. I don't think utopia exists. God is reigning. Jesus is reigning right now, 100%. He's been reigning since he ascended into heaven. His reign has been going on for nearly 2,000 years. But he also promised us that we will be persecuted. And so I think the only perspective eschatologically that makes complete sense from a logical perspective, but also from a scriptural perspective, is millennialism. To me, that's the only one that makes any sense. And so my biggest issue with this, and then I'm going to move to the next topic. My biggest issue with this is the complaints from people who are like, how dare he question John MacArthur? As if John MacArthur's on some level of position to where he can't be questioned. And then they'll be like, well, why didn't he say anything while he was alive? Just showing they haven't seen Jeff Durbin's stuff, because he's been pretty actively against MacArthur individually, but dispensational premillennialism, Jeff Durbin has been for his entire ministry. That at least since I've been listening to him the last 5-6 years. So I don't understand this, like, we can't question certain people mentality. That's for all preachers. That's for all people who teach or read the word. Like, your theology, I think you should want your theology to be questioned. Because it isn't about, am I on the right team? It's about, am I searching for the truth? I'm not looking to be on the cool kids club. Like, I'm a premill because John MacArthur is. No. So let's just use me individually. I'm not an all-mill because the first time I ever heard of amillennialism was through Sam Storms. And it's from the Night of Eschatology with him, John Piper, Doug Wilson. I can't remember the pre-mill guy's name off the top of my head right now. I think it's Jim something, or Jim Hamilton, I think might be his name. I could be wrong. But it's the first time I've ever heard of anything other than what is known as premillennialism or dispensationalism. And I'm not an amillennial because Sam Storms convinced me to be an amillennialism or an amillennialist. I'm an amillennial because I heard Sam Storm talk about it. It sparked a desire to know the truth. So then I read Kim Riddlebarger and other books on the topic and was convinced from the use of scripture, this is the only thing that makes logical sense to me. Right? So I'm not, you can question every person on that line. Let's say Calvinism, right? I'm not Reformed because I listen to Vodi Bakum or R.C. Sproul or James White or any of those people, right? I'm not Reformed because of that. I'm Reformed because I listened to them. I heard them talk about it. Artaxerxes is the preacher who I learned Tulip from. And he had a 5-sermon series strictly on Tulip, one for each letter. I'm not a Calvinist because of Artaxerxes or any of those preachers. I'm a Calvinist because I heard the doctrine taught, studied for myself, questioned the other beliefs that I held at the time, and found them to be missing and lacking, and I only care about the truth. And I read the scriptures, and constantly, like once you see the doctrines of grace, once you see covenant theology, once you see Calvinism in scripture, you see it everywhere, and you can't miss it, and it's just blatantly in your face. And the more you study it, the more you're just like, wow, I missed it. That's why I'm a Calvinist. Not because all these other preachers told me to be, but because I heard it from other preachers, questioned my own theology, even the preachers in my own personal life, like the preacher that I was under, right? Question them. Like, I think the most respectful thing you can do is question the person teaching you theology. Because if they're wrong, they need to be called out for it, for teaching something wrong. And that doesn't mean that you are saying they have some sort of moral flaw. We're all men. We all fail. We all don't know the truth, right? And so this idea, this principle that because he's John MacArthur, he can't be critiqued or criticized, I just have an issue with that. And that's not just for John MacArthur. It's for everyone. If you put anyone on a pedestal to where they can't be criticized, you have to question your heart posture and why you do that. And at some point you have to question, are you making an idol out of this person or this teaching? I did it. I mean, I'm personally guilty of this with someone like Ravi Zacharias. When I first got into like the Reformed movement, 2012, 2013, Mark Driscoll was Reformed at the time, and like I lived and died by everything Mark Driscoll taught. And then like he fell, and then Ravi passed away, and then came out that, you know, he was in a scandal, right? And I feel like at times, like even like small group leaders that I had at church, where I would put on like they're the only people I listen to, and then they either leave the church, leave from teaching youth group, go be a missionary. So I feel like God was trying to protect me from making idols out of certain people. And it's one of those things where like we have to balance that. But I really want to get to the main topic that I want to talk about is the gospel's enough, right? Because we can disagree on these third tier issues like eschatology, but we have to agree on the gospel. And one of the things that I've really found troubling, if I can just be honest with my own personal story, is over the last 20, 30, 40 years. I just turned 29, so I wasn't alive that whole period of time. But over that period of time, this sort of seeker-friendly mentality, and more specifically, like, I even think back on, like, me growing up with, like, Young, Restless, and Reformed, and what that did, and I think it got a lot of people thinking about Reformed theology, but everyone that sort of led it was super, like, immature, and I'm not going to say immature in their faith, but like, I don't think that they thought it would catch on the way it did. I think that there's this movement in the church to try to make Christianity seeker sensitive and look like something that the cool kids do. And as a result, there's like this watering down of the experience, right? And what we're seeing now, so like for context to what I'm about to say, in 1940 America, it would be pretty unregular for families to go to church, for husband and wife to go to church together. But then World War II broke out, and the men all got shipped out to war. And so you only had women and children going to church. And so what happened was churches started changing the way they ran services to attract to women, because that was their target audience at the time, because the men were out fighting wars. And so it was, the way you painted the sanctuary, you had flowers, it smelled good, the music was softer, it was a little bit more emotional, right? There's emotionalism that came out of this area, or this era. And then the men came back from war. These were war-torn, scarred for life, PTSD veterans who just conquered the Nazis. And they came back having been through the hells of war, and they went to church. And it was soft, effeminate, smelled girly emotionalism that these rugged soldiers just did not care about. Just did not have any interest in that until the men left. And from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, 2010s, even early 2020s, consistently women made up 60% or more of church populations were women. Well, for the first time ever, I think the survey was done in like 2024, 2025. For the first time ever, there was a growth in male church attendance over women. So what the current trend right now is, through this progressivism, and I think this is very hopeful. This isn't like a black pill. I think this is very, very hopeful things to an extreme. There's a limit to the hope you can have, right? Because of what I'm going to follow this up with. But for the first time in decades, more men are starting to go to church than women. We actually see a decline in female participation in Christian service and church services, mainly because of, I believe, progressivism, liberalism, feminism. The women have been deceived by the spirit of the age. Partly because, I don't want to put all the blame on women, partly because men haven't been men and protected them from that. And so the women have been completely delusioned by feminism and all of this, and they're all leaving churches, or they're going to progressive places of worship that call themselves a Christian church, but they're LGBT affirming. They have completely been given over to the spirit of the age. And what we're seeing is that men are coming to church. And what we're also seeing just combined is the men and the women who are now coming to church in this younger Gen Alpha generation. They don't just want the same old seeker-sensitive, churchianity that the millennials, Gen X, and all of them went through, where it was super feminized, sort of neutral, that don't make a scene. It's just, Jesus is your best friend. Jesus is radical, dude, right? type preaching, and they want more reverence. They want doctrine. I would put myself in this category in a way, because part of the reason why, when I graduated high school, part of the reason why I stopped going to church is this movement of everything just got to be about feelings and emotions. And you can't ask questions. You can't be theologically sound. On top of the fact that I don't believe in my early years that I was truly saved at the time. I think it was head knowledge, not heart knowledge. And so the first opportunity I had to leave, I wanted to do what I wanted to do. Sort of prodigal son type messaging. Like, Lord, give me that inheritance. I'm out. Yeah, this Jesus stuff is cool, but I'm out. I'm going to go do what I want to do type rebellion. And so you add that on top of, like, but also I see it as a protection in a way. Like, I think God worked mysteriously to get me out of the COVID era Christianity. Because in like BLM era Christianity, because I think I would have bought into third wayism, and all of the stuff that people like David Platt and Matt Chandler were pushing at the time, because those were people that I were listening to, and that I think I would have continued to buy into. And so I think there was sort of a sovereignty of God moment where he's sort of like, well, we're going to pull you out of this dead church. Go do what you want. You don't really want me right now anyway, so don't be miserable. And I'm going to come get you when the time is right. That's truly what I believe, that he didn't abandon me. He let me go experience life the way I wanted it in my sinful nature. And then I was convinced of the wages of sin. And once this sort of era of like wokeism finally was exposed, I look at the timing of the whole thing, and it's kind of interesting to me. I could just be making that up, and just that could be an emotional response too. But the topic here is, what I'm really trying to get at is Protestia, which I'm not necessarily a fan favorite of Protestia. I'm just going to say that. But they posted an article, and on their social medias, the video of a church, a mega church. I didn't even read the article, because it's not just about this one individual church. I think this is a systemic church problem. Of just the evangelical, non-denominational mega church issues in and of itself. This seeker-sensitive, safe space, we want to just invite everyone in, and it's the natural fruit of Arminianism. The only quote that I read from there is when I shared the article with someone, and he posted back about a quote in it. And the pastor of this church essentially stated, we're willing to do anything up to the point of it being sinful to get people to come to our church. And that's just that's the fruit of Arminianism, right? So theology matters. I say that a lot. Theology matters, and correct theology matters, because the gospel is not, and the responsibility of the gospel and the Great Commission is not to go make converts and everyone, you got to talk to everyone, because if you don't get that person saved, you're personally responsible for that. There's a weight that a lot of Arminians put on themselves and others that, you messed up there, you didn't get him saved, what if he never hears again? There's a pressure. And Arminianism is very hopeless at times. And I think even as someone who claimed to be Reformed and Calvinistic and held to the doctrines of theology, I even think early in that study of mine, I held Arminian views on evangelism. Like, I have to get this person saved. And I was so, like, guilt-ridden because I was so afraid to talk to people. And now, I shouldn't have been afraid to talk to people, but I was so afraid to talk to people because I felt that if I couldn't get them saved, then I messed up and I wasn't good enough at doing it. And so there was just no point in doing it. And which then created more guilt for, well, I didn't even talk to this person. I didn't try to, right? And so there was just so much guilt being carried along. And Calvinism, the doctrines of grace, what we see in the New Testament, what I thoroughly believe is the teaching of Jesus and the teaching of Paul, is that there is no burden to get someone saved because that's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to plant. I don't water or grow anything. That's God's response. Like, God is what saves. All I have to do is to preach the gospel and then leave the results to Him. I don't know who's elect, but God does, and He's the one that's going to get them saved. And He's going to put people in position at the time. He's going to provide both the means of someone's salvation, the person who's going to speak to that person, as well as the end to it, which is the salvation itself. And all of it is a work of Christ. It's not my work, right? Even if I do get someone saved by my words, it's not really my words. It's the words that God gave to me, and the only way that someone listened and understood and responded is because God opened their heart to do that. Like, when you truly understand what the doctrines of grace and what Calvinism teaches, the weight of evangelism is off your shoulder. It's so much easier. You don't have to walk into every conversation saying, well, I'm pressured to get this person saved, and if I don't, then I'm a failure. There's a pressure off of, like, mission trips. Like, I can't tell you how many mission trips I see people go on, and they'll come back and they'll be like, well, no one got saved, so this must have been, like, a waste of time. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, no, what you did was just plant a seed. So maybe in 20 years, someone else, 17 trips later, talks to some individuals there, and the first 17 trips were just planting and tilling the soil and planting seeds, and on the 18th trip you talk to people and God provides new life for some of them. Like you don't have to get everyone you talk to saved. You just have to be obedient in expressing the gospel to people, right? And the gospel's enough. This whole thing with like, so this church, what they did was they had like a whole Beyoncé like concert, apparently, like where they all dressed up in like super tight, skin tight clothing, like it was a Beyoncé concert, and they did some Beyoncé songs on the stage during the church service. And my immediate question was, who is this for? Because at the risk of alienating Christians in your church who aren't going to like that, for the potentiality of maybe getting people who aren't in the church to come to church because you're the cool church. But the problem with that is that Romans 3 clearly teaches no one is seeking for God. So no one's actually seeker-friendly because there are no seekers. In the way that Arminians like to say that people are just seeking for God. No, they're not. They're in their natural state, they are God haters. And as someone who has been in the church and in the world, as most people have been, but as someone who's like been on that side, if I would have saw that, I would have started laughing. If I went to a church that started doing worldly things, one, I'm walking out, but two, like, I would laugh on the way out the door. And the reason I think that way is like these seekers that they think exist. Why would they come to church to see Beyonce when Beyonce performed poorly, when they could just go see Beyonce and get the real thing? like we have to stop trying to be like the world. Jesus told us that we are not of this world, and we are to be very different, and the world is going to hate us, and we are going to be persecuted, and we are going to be hated, and people aren't going to find us cool, and we're going to be the exiles in a foreign nation. But know this, that when they hate you, they hated me first. Right? Like what are you expecting to come out of it? They put our leader on a cross. The guy that we all claim to worship as God, they put him on a cross. The whole thing, the Christ in the name Christian, they put him on a cross. And you think that you could somehow convince the same world system that persecuted the prophets, ridiculed Elijah, and ran him out of the town, killed all of the apostles. Oh, and by the way, put the only perfect person to ever live on a cross. You think that somehow you can be good enough, you can be nice enough, you can be cool enough to where that you can win that world system. Guys, by the way, we don't defeat the world. Christ has already defeated it. The gospel is enough. We don't need all these gimmicky things to try to win people over. The gospel is enough. That's it. That's all you need. It's pretty simple. The gospel. What does Paul say? We preach Christ crucified. That's all we gotta tell them. What does Jesus tell us in the Great Commission? Go into all the world and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them and teaching them what I taught you. What is that? The gospel. Our command is to go and preach the gospel. And these same people who try to do all the seeker-friendly, cool things like having Beyoncé concerts on stage, or doing these like movie nights where like movie church services where they'll take like, and it's typically their summer series every summer, where they'll take like 4 weeks, 8 weeks to do like movies at whatever, and the sermon's is topical, and they'll try to sort of take a movie and be like, and this is how you could see Christian values in these movies. Not that you can't find Christian values in secular movies; they're there, but that's not what the church is for. And it's gimmicky, and it's what you win people to, you have to do to keep them. Which is why a lot of these mega churches, and a lot of these churches in general, do a bunch of circus clown act, and they can't ever move past it, because the second they get deeper into theology and doctrine, the people that they brought in because of the gimmicks leave. And a lot of these churches are just focused on what comes in the offering plate and how many members they have, so that they can boast about how many people they have in the pews. And the church can be full of members, but empty at conversion. You could have a church full of people that you're just entertaining on the road to hell, who don't believe in Jesus, but they come because this place, somewhat entertaining. I got friends here. Who knows? Who knows the reason why these people come? But if you only keep them there because of the gimmick and not because of the gospel, you're leading them into destruction. The gospel is enough. And the gospel must be front and center at every church service. And if it's not, I don't know if you're doing church right. The gospel has to be the message. See, it's the only thing that is, because these same people will wear "I'm unashamed of the gospel" and quote the first part of Romans 1:16. For I'm unashamed of the gospel. But then they won't finish the quote. They won't finish out the rest of that verse, which says, "For it is the power of God unto salvation." And maybe they believe that in theory in their head, but in praxis and in practice, it may sound good and their theology might be right. In the same way, like, we'll tie these two topics together. John MacArthur's theology on eschatology, his theology said one thing, that we lose down here when it comes, right? That's what he spoke. That's what he taught. We lose down here. But in practice, he also told them, hey, by the way, go out and vote for righteousness. And towards the end of his ministry and his life, he was very vocal against COVID lockdowns. Well, why are you vocal against those, John, if your theology is that this should be expected? Like this, right? Why are you saying, well, we need to vote out people, we need to do this, we need to get political now, right? Because there were some inconsistencies between his theology and his praxis, and how he, right? Just on this issue, John MacArthur was a solid dude, right? I'm not saying all that, right? But excuse me, and so their theology might be, I'm unashamed of the gospel because it's the power of God into salvation. They might believe that theologically, and because the Bible says so. But in their practice, in the way that they actually live, they don't believe that is the power of God into salvation, because if they believed it, they wouldn't need the gimmicks to win people over. They wouldn't need those gimmicks. They're adding to. You need Jesus plus being cool and Beyoncé to win some people over, apparently. Right? And it's just, it's made the church a circus. I don't understand it. I don't know why preachers do this. I think we need to call out everyone who does it. If you go to a church that does gimmicky, topical things and they never get into deep theological discussion, my recommendation is find a better church. Find one that gets into the Word, and they study and they practice and they do life together, and they read the Word and they study it, and they seek for knowledge and truth, not just gimmick. We do so well in American churchianity at worshiping in spirit. We do so bad in mainline evangelicalism of worshiping in pursuit of the truth. There's so much gimmick and spiritual hooping and hollering, pastors running around churches, running laps, saying they call it the Spirit. There's so much gimmick like that, but there's no truth. And you have to worship in spirit and truth. And if you don't have the Spirit, but you have only truth, that's cold, hard legalism. But if you only have the Spirit and you don't have the truth, right, that's also bad. You need both. And so that's where I'll leave this. Thank you all for listening. I will see you all in the next episode. Whether it'll probably be exposit, we'll do John 17. But until then, I will see you on the next episode.